Hello, and thank you for joining us for BDSA's newest webinar, Winning in New Jersey Cannabis, Turning Data into Business Success. My name is Brendan Mitchell-Cheeseborough. I'm an analyst and marketing content manager with BDSA. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Rick Maturo, who's BDSA's Director of Professional Services. Today, we're going to be looking at New Jersey's new adult use cannabis market. We're going to be giving an overview of where the state's cannabis market stands within the context of the U.S. industry, as well as the global cannabis industry. We're going to be taking a look at consumer dynamics and brand trends in the state, and we're going to give a picture of where the market's projected to land in the next 5 years. Just a couple pieces of housekeeping. We will have a Q&A session after this presentation, so if you can go to the questions drop down of the GoToWebinar panel, you can put your questions in there. So one of us might be answering questions during the presentation, and we'll be picking a few towards the end, so get those questions in. And this webinar will be posted online afterwards at bdsa.com. So getting right into it, BDSA offers 3 core data products, which we'll be drawing from in our discussion of the New Jersey market today. So first, our retail sales tracking product. Retail sales tracking offers granular retail sales data from 13 different adult use and medical markets in the US. BDSA's retail sales tracking gives visibility into category sales, visibility into unit sales. We discuss leading brands, leading products, and we give visibility into the leading brand houses across the largest markets. That's complemented by our market forecasts, which are updated twice a year. Our market forecasts give a comprehensive high-level picture of where cannabis markets worldwide are going in the next 5 years. We do focus more on North American markets, US and Canada, but our market forecasts include all global markets, and we project consumer growth, sales growth by channel, and projected legal sales by product category. To round it out, we have our Consumer Insights product, also updated twice a year. Consumer Insights gives a look into consumer demographics, psychographics, purchasing behaviors, and consumption drivers, as well as giving trended views for all these different data points going back 4 years. Now, before we go and specifically look at the New Jersey cannabis industry, I feel like it's important that we take a moment to get a pulse check of where the industry stands today. And it's pretty clear, we're halfway through 2022, that the cannabis industry is really at an inflection point. And there's a combination of factors that are leading to this. There's general macroeconomic trends, economic inflation. There's the regulatory uncertainty with regards to banking access, SAFE Banking Act sort of getting stalled again, inflated tax rates from 280E, onerous state and local taxes, especially in the most mature markets like California. People are dealing with significant declines in the wholesale market, which are depleting margins. And there's increasing pressure from an illicit market. And this increased competition is driving significant price compression across markets and categories. And this is resulting in a reliance on promotions and discounts to attract and retain consumers at the dispensary, which continues to make the path to profitability an upward battle for a lot of people. That being said, regulations are still loosening across the US. We've got more and more markets opening up, more and more states looking to legalize and open up a few years down the road. And especially when we look at the Northeast region, there's a real bright spot because we think this region is going to be a big source of growth in the near term and out to 2026. So already in 2022, we've seen 2 markets launch adult use sales, New Mexico and New Jersey. Rhode Island Governor McKee did formally sign adult use legalization back in May, and adult use sales in that state could start as early as the end of this year, with New York possibly following at the end of this year as well. But a lot of people, especially in the tri-state area, are counting down the days until New York and Connecticut formally open in 2022 and 2023, respectively. By that time, you'll see the entire Northeast region, except for New Hampshire, with operating adult use retail. And given the size of the tri-state population and the annual tourism to the region, the Northeast and specifically the tri-state area of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut are very likely to become a new epicenter of growth for the industry and hopefully push forward and restore some of this optimism that we feel has sort of waned in the past year. And there's really good reason for the industry to stay optimistic about these new and emerging markets. Even though mature markets are faltering, we see that the US cannabis adult use market, which is represented by the blue bar in the middle, is still slated to make up most of the global cannabis sales through 2026. And much of this growth is directly attributable to these new and emerging markets in states like New York and New Jersey. New York and New Jersey are both slated to be top 10 contributors to global cannabis sales by 2026. And they're expected to outpace more mature markets like Colorado, Washington, Oregon, and California when it comes to projected growth. So some global market growth will come from the US medical market, which is denoted by the lavender bars at the bottom. And the US medical market is expected to have a compound annual growth rate of about 1.5% between 2022 and 2026, whereas the adult use market in the US is expected to have a growth rate of about 17% in that same period. And this is a look at some of the global contributors to growth. So outside of the US and Canada, Germany and Mexico are two key contributors to international growth of sales. Germany, which is expected to have a draft bill of their adult use legalization later this year, is really attractive for people who have their sights set on international expansion. Germany has the largest population and the largest economy in the EU, and with their influence and those figures, they're expected to exert a lot of pressure on neighboring EU countries like France, Italy, and Switzerland to follow their lead, legalize adult use, and launch sales out to 2026. Mexico announced in late July that their adult use market will be opening in December of this year, and by 2026, Mexico is expected to come in just behind Germany as the largest non-US, non-Canadian, and international contributor to adult use sales. So once this occurs, Mexico will join Canada and Uruguay to become the third nation to legalize adult use sales federally. Other than Mexico, a few other Latin American countries like Peru, Brazil, and Uruguay are expected to contribute about 400 million to global sales, making their collective contribution about the same size as Italy's out to 2026. So hopefully some of those growth numbers restored a bit of optimism, so we can change gears and focus on the New Jersey market specifically now. So brands and retailers should be really excited about New Jersey's adult use launch, not only because it provides legal access to millions of more Americans, but also because of the location and the timing of the launch. Two things that New Jersey can capitalize on. One, the fact that its most populous cities, Newark, Jersey City, Paterson, Elizabeth, they're all part of the tri-state area. And two, the fact that New Jersey has first mover advantage in the Northeast, with sales that are launching before New York, before Connecticut, and before Pennsylvania. So most New Jersey consumers, because they have that first mover advantage, are likely to source their legal cannabis from New Jersey rather than crossing the George Washington Bridge or traveling to other states that already have active markets, like Massachusetts. But the speed of launch doesn't just protect New Jersey's market when it comes to retaining these resident buyers. It also attracts consumers from nearby New York City and from tri-state areas of Connecticut, and even some out-of-state consumers from the Philadelphia, Delaware region. New York City alone sees about 53 million visitors each year who are over the age of 21. So there's a really big opportunity to appeal to these tri-state visitors who come from across the country and around the world. And though some of these tourists are likely to purchase from New York City dispensaries once New York formally opens up adult use retail, which we believe will be in Q4 of 2022, New Jersey will enjoy nearly a year free from New York and Connecticut competition. But all states that have made the transition from medical-only access to adult use access, there are certainly some wrinkles with regards to New Jersey's cannabis rules and regulations. And I think that interested people, invested stakeholders really need to understand some of these rules and regulations. So here we have three buckets of what we think are some of the key rules and regulations. And I really want to focus on a few of these because they're really different from other adult use markets that have launched already. And we think they'll have really broad implications of how New Jersey's adult use market will develop. So when it comes to access, consumption, and possession, New Jersey has joined a small cohort of states like Illinois and Washington that have adult use cannabis retail, but don't allow home grow of cannabis. So even in states where home grow is allowed, most consumers still purchase cannabis from a retail dispensary. But this rule eventually will lead to some marginal benefit for New Jersey brands and retailers by sort of cutting out that competition from hobbyists. In the second bucket of rules that we have here, cultivation, manufacturing, and vertical integration, New Jersey made the decision to ban vertical integration for adult use license holders at least until February of 2023. And this means that adult use retail licensees can't own and operate a retail establishment and grow their own cannabis. There is a major exception to the rule that medical licensees who were active prior to the launch of adult use are exempt from this vertical integration ban, and they can sell into the adult use market, which means that they'll be actively playing in the state. If they were actively playing in the state prior to adult use, they can continue to grow their own cannabis, as well as supply to retail operations for sale to adult use customers. This is going to be a big advantage for the legacy medical firms because virtually all of them are affiliated with large multi-state operators. In the near term, they can continue to supply their own stores with their own cannabis at a higher margin than buying from third-party wholesalers. And they can also grow their wholesale business by selling to these newly minted adult use stores who can't have their own supply up until 2023. So wrapping it up in that third bucket of rules, marketing, advertising, packaging, and branding, New Jersey is similar to a lot of other states. You have things like limits on edible potency, 10 milligrams per dose, 100 milligrams THC per package. That's pretty standard. Flour and other products have to come in child-proof, resealable, opaque packaging. That's pretty standard across a lot of markets. But one thing where it's kind of unique is that packaged flour is capped at just over 7 grams. So though consumers are still allowed to purchase up to an ounce per trip, this 7-gram cap is likely to keep New Jersey flour on the more expensive side relative to other markets that have either deli style or larger package weights allowed, because wholesalers are going to be passing along those package costs to retailers who are then going to pass it on to the customers. So despite some of these rules and regulations that make New Jersey's adult use market a little different from other states, legal sales are still expected, legal consumers and adoption is still expected to grow with the addition of adult use, and sales are projected to more than triple between 2022 and 2026. So in just about 7 months, by the end of the year, New Jersey is expected to have total sales grow to roughly 700 million. And by 2026, sales are expected to be around 2.3 billion, with an impressive compound annual growth rate of about 35% from 2022 to 2026. And as you can see from the light purple shading on each bar, most sales for the foreseeable future will come from the adult use channel as the medical market continues to contract to 2026. This is a similar pattern that we've observed in other medicinal markets when adult use comes online. So another point that we think is really important to call out from the start, New Jersey has the lowest per capita dispensary count of any adult use market. There's less than 1 dispensary per 100,000 residents. And this is coming in conjunction with low supply, high demand, and the dual channel retailers' legal obligation to supply all the medical patients who they had before the launch of adult use. The market is still likely to experience some growing pains, such as high prices, maybe limited product assortment, but that's kind of what we expect when we have a market come online with a limited number of licensees and a really limited retail landscape. So now we have a little bit of a better idea of the size and growth trajectory that we're expecting from New Jersey's fully adult use market. So I'm gonna kick it over to Rick right now, and we're gonna take a closer look at the market's performance in the first few months.
Thanks, Brandon. So now that we have a better understanding of New Jersey's market dynamics and that growth trajectory, let's take a look at how the market has been performing in the first few months since adult use launched. So New Jersey adult use sales formally kicked off April 21st, and after the first 4 months and 9 days, adult use sales have surpassed $162 million. From May through August, adult use sales posted persistent month-over-month growth and had compound monthly growth rate of about 10%. And though sales grew month over month from April to July, declining medicinal sales in August resulted in slightly lower total sales in August than what were observed in July. So that's what sales have been thus far. So what does brand composition in New Jersey look like today? Although New Jersey's obviously still in its expansion phase, sales and share still remain strongly concentrated among large MSO-owned brands. In fact, the top 5 brand houses listed here together account for around 80% of all New Jersey regulated cannabis sales from the April through August time period. Accordingly, the top 5 brands in New Jersey are owned by just 4 of the brand houses listed here. As previously mentioned, this concentration is directly attributable to those brand houses having a historic presence in New Jersey's medicinal market, which allowed them to not only have that first entrant advantage in selling to adult use consumers earlier, but it also allowed them to continue to engage in vertical integration to supply products to their adult use retail operations. And this also provides further advantages due to the opportunity to sell additional wholesale products to new adult use dispensaries, who, as Brendan mentioned earlier, are banned from doing so until at least February of 2023. So early on, we know that those sales are still pretty concentrated among the top few brands, but specifically, which categories have the highest share in New Jersey in these early days since adult use kicked off? Well, in the first 4+ months of adult use sales, flower continues to hold the majority of sales share. In fact, if we look at the top 10 cannabis products selling in New Jersey over that time period, 8 of the top 10 were flower products. When examining flower's share in other more mature markets, what we typically see is flower share netting to about 40% of sales. But here you can see that New Jersey still has more than 50% of its sales coming from flower in these first 4 months. So given this, our expectation is that flower is going to begin to cede share as brands begin to introduce more products from other categories. Specifically, we expect dabbable concentrates, vape, and pre-rolls to grow their share of sales as the market matures and the supply begins to stabilize. Now, that being said, even early on, the leading categories by share in New Jersey really do align with the typical order that we're seeing in other markets, where we still see flower having the largest share, followed by vapes and edibles. So in that respect, New Jersey's early days are not all that different from what would be expected in a more mature market if you look at the share of those different categories. So what does pricing look like in New Jersey? Well, like many newly minted adult use markets, average retail pricing in New Jersey has experienced some shifts in the first 4+ months. Pricing in flower and vape particularly, those 2 categories that are leading by sales share, they've remained relatively stable despite peaking in August. And we've also seen some pretty strong stability from some more minor categories like shake, trim, and light and sublinguals, albeit there were a couple of anomalies there. Now, that being said, however, edibles and pre-rolls, which are the 3rd and 4th ranked categories by sales share, they've fallen precipitously month over month in terms of their average retail price. Dabbable concentrates average retail price peaked in July after about 2 months of ARP increases before dropping about $2 in August. Now, assuming that New Jersey's adult use market encounters some more low supply issues later this year, and due to the high demand and limited retail and licensed cultivators available, our prediction is that adult use flower prices, are expected to stay about the same or potentially even increase. So again, that $14 is likely to stay for the foreseeable future. So how do New Jersey's prices in August compare to other adult use markets that we've seen that are certainly more mature? Well, given New Jersey's progression from a more closed-off medical-only market to a fully accessible adult use market that's still very concentrated among a few brands and products with limited AU retail presence, New Jersey's prices are currently the most expensive across all categories, across all 9 BDSA reported adult use markets, with there being only one exception, and that's sublinguals have a slightly higher ARP in the state of Massachusetts. But to drive this home even more, New Jersey's BQ ARP comes in at more than 250% higher on average than the market with the lowest ARP for each category. So for example, if we look at New Jersey's shake, trim, and light price at around $9.52 and compare that to Colorado's shake, trim, and light price where it's around $1.77, we can see that New Jersey is nearly 4.5 times as expensive as Colorado for the shake, trim, and light category. And given New Jersey's more concentrated market dynamics, we expect pricing in New Jersey to closely mirror other markets where we've seen a similar trajectory, specifically Illinois and Massachusetts. And in the case of Illinois and Massachusetts, even though we've seen prices decline over the years, we haven't seen the decline to the degree that some more less concentrated, more mature markets like California, Colorado, Nevada, and Oregon have encountered in late 2021 and early 2022. So even though Illinois and Massachusetts remain 2 of the most expensive adult use markets in the US today, our expectation is that New Jersey's pricing is going to keep pace with those 2 markets and likely is going to be more expensive than those 2 markets for the foreseeable future. So now that we have a better understanding of New Jersey's market dynamics and the market's performance following the launch of adult use sales, let's shift gears to better understand the attitudes and the behaviors of New Jersey's growing cannabis consumer population. So at BDSA, we broadly segment US adults into 3 buckets based on their behaviors as it relates to cannabis. So we have cannabis consumers, we have cannabis acceptors, and we have cannabis rejectors. So cannabis consumers are defined as those adults who have consumed cannabis or a cannabis-containing product in the past 6 months. Cannabis acceptors are defined as those who haven't consumed cannabis in the past 6 months, but say that they're likely to do so in the future. And lastly, there's the cannabis rejectors. Those are individuals who would not consider consuming cannabis or cannabis-containing products in the future. Now, if we compare New Jersey's consumer acceptor and rejector distribution, which is represented by the donut on the right side of the slide, we can see that New Jersey's composition is not significantly all that different than the rest of the adult use states, as denoted by the left donut. And despite New Jersey's adult use market still being in its infancy, nearly half of New Jersey adults report consuming cannabis in the past 6 months. And a little more than a quarter of New Jersey adults say they're likely to consume cannabis products in the future. Now, given the progression that we've seen in other markets that have made the transition from medicinal only to full adult use sales, the percentage of consumers in New Jersey is likely going to increase by several percentage points as the market matures and some of the current acceptors convert into consumers as access becomes more widespread and convenient, and we start to remedy some of those assortment and supply issues. Now, there's 2 main challenges that could impede the speed of legal consumer adoption in New Jersey. The first one is its high average retail price, which, as we said, does not look likely to decrease in the near term. There's also the likelihood that low supply could stymie regulated consumer adoption within the adult use channel. But the biggest challenge for that high price is that it's most likely going to keep that illicit market that's active in New Jersey pretty competitive with the regulated market, because that high price really provides less of an incentive for illicit consumers to make the switch and fully adopt the regulated channel as their primary source for cannabis products. So definitely something to keep in mind as you think about the trajectory going forward in New Jersey. So let's take a look at what drives cannabis consumption in New Jersey and how New Jersey consumers may be somewhat differentiated from the aggregate of adult use consumers across the US. So unlike most adult use markets where pain relief typically tops the list of consumption drivers, New Jersey consumers are much more motivated to consume by a desire to manage anxiety and to relax and be mellow. Now, this trend, it's likely due to the very recent transition to adult use sales, as some medical-only markets show similar patterns with consumption drivers. For example, if we look at managing anxiety specifically, that also tops the list of consumption drivers among medical consumers in the medical-only Ohio market. It's also important to note that New Jersey consumers show similar attitudes towards consuming for general health and wellness needs as consumers in other adult use markets. With the shares of New Jersey consumers who report consuming to improve their overall health, sleep better, and to be happy being comparable to the aggregate of adult use markets. So we talked a little bit about why New Jersey consumers are wanting to consume cannabis, but what's driving their choice when they're thinking about which products they actually want to purchase, and how do those product choice decision drivers really differ from the aggregate of adult use consumers outside of New Jersey? So unlike the typical adult use consumer, New Jersey consumers are much less motivated by high THC, taste, price, and even prior brand experience. Now, all of this is likely a function of a relatively immature, regulated consumer base. We can see that this is further reinforced by New Jersey consumers being more likely to rely on the recommendation of a friend or a family member, as well as having packaging being an indicator of high quality that's going to drive their decision. Normally, we would expect to see recommendations from a bud tender being much higher on this list if folks in New Jersey had a little bit more familiarity with the regulated retail landscape. So we've looked at kind of what those product choice drivers are, but what's motivating New Jersey consumers when they're deciding which dispensary or specific cannabis retailer they want to shop at? Well, whereas vertical integration or the ability to grow their own cannabis ranks at the bottom among the aggregate of adult use consumers, you can see here that for New Jersey consumers, this really is a key store choice driver. Now, given New Jersey's pre-adult use reliance on delivery, and this is especially true for folks that live in urban areas, and especially those who live in urban areas that may have been utilizing the illicit market to get their cannabis, it definitely makes sense that we see here that consumers prioritize delivery much stronger than the aggregate of consumers. This also would correspond with why locational convenience is significantly less motivating for New Jersey consumers than the aggregate of adult use consumers. A couple of other notable differences I just want to call out really center around the low price as well as availability and those bud tender recommendations like I stated before. And again, I think all of this really speaks to the fact that you have a relatively immature regulated cannabis consuming population. If we were to take a look at this same chart in about a year's time as the market has matured somewhat, I guarantee we wouldn't see as much differentiation with some of those really disparate differences that we're seeing between the two consumer populations. So we've obviously taken a look and did a good job to understand, where some of those market dynamics are, where the New Jersey market is going to take us in terms of its size and its trajectory. We've also taken a look at what the performance of the market looks like in these first 4+ months with adult use sales. And we've also taken a look at some of the motivations and attitudes that consumers have. So before we go into our question and answer part of the presentation, I just wanted to go ahead and leave you with 5 of our large predictions for where the New Jersey market is heading in the future. So in summary, we've kind of seen that New Jersey prices, they're going to remain expensive, and they're most likely going to remain the most expensive in the US. So our prediction is that we're not going to see any significant price reduction for at least the next year, or at least until we have more cultivators putting more product into the market. We also know that those small and those independent cannabis brands, especially those that aren't directly affiliated with a retail brand, they're going to incur tighter margins at least until February of 2023, when they can either choose to engage in vertical integration or start to look outside of the existing providers of cannabis to retail stores. They'll have more choice and hopefully see differences in terms of lower prices. We also know that because of price, because of limited availability and limited retail presence, that the illicit market will remain strong in terms of its competition with the regulated market in New Jersey. And again, given decisions that have been made and what the makeup looks like right now, we really think that the illicit market's going to be pretty competitive for the foreseeable future. So as it relates to New Jersey, we know that road to growth and seeing the market mature very fast is going to face some strong headwind. Obviously, we touched on things like limited supply and high average retail price, but we also know that there's going to be challenges once New York and Connecticut go ahead and open their adult use markets. And that's not just because people have more choice, but you're going to lose a pretty significant portion of that tri-state cross-border traffic that you're probably starting to see now as New Yorkers and even those in Connecticut are actually making their way down to New Jersey to check out some illegal retail establishments. But to leave you guys on a high note here, we definitely know that the percentage of New Jersey cannabis consumers is going to continue to rise as we see more of those acceptors convert into consumers, and we see some of those rejectors in turn convert into acceptors. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start taking a look at some of the questions that you guys have put down here in the question box here. Brendan, I don't know if there's any initial questions that you want to touch on first while I'm going through some of these.
Yeah, we got a good question from Brad asking whether the slides and presentation will be available afterwards. Yes, we will have the recording and the slide deck posted on bdsa.com, so just look out for that. It'll be online in the next couple of days. And also something that comes to mind just off the top of my head, seen a lot of comparisons of the New Jersey market to Illinois, highly regulated medical market, not a huge retailer count by the time they actually launched adult use sales. And Illinois, just a few months in, started to deal with some supply issues. Do you see that sort of coming down the line with New Jersey, or have we sort of passed that point at the 4-month mark of adult use sales?
Yeah, I definitely think that we're still ripe to see some supply issues, and those will probably become more apparent moving towards the latter part of the year.
All right, cool. We have another question from Carly. What are the key attributes of the brands that are leading in sales in the industry, other than the fact that they are owned by MSOs?
Right now, I would say if you kind of look at the distribution of what the brands are putting out there, we do tend to see a lot of focus on the flower category, which certainly is attributable to having your top 10 products, 8 of them being flower. That being said, though, flower is not the sole focus for these brands. I mean, they do have a pretty wide assortment relative to some of the smaller or more independent players that are operating in the broader industry. So I think they've done a good job of getting a wide assortment of products, but right now we really are seeing a lot of interest in the flower category, but a growing presence for the edible products. 2 of the other top 10 products in New Jersey are also edibles as well. So those 2 categories, are definitely focused for those brands now. But again, I think once the population matures a little bit more, gets a better handle of all the different types of products and categories that are available to them, we will see that mix shift a little bit more and probably mirror closer to what we see in more established and mature adult use markets.
Yeah, and sort of a follow-up to that, I know from looking at consumer data that there is some cross-consumption. People who generally just loyal inhalables consumers who switch between flower and vapes. So do you expect that some of those vape brands are going to pick up share once there's more products on the market and retail availability improves a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly I think something we've seen in other markets that's related to that is a lot of times folks that are coming from the illicit market may not have as much familiarity with vape products as they do with flower, given that flower is the predominant form when you think about the illicit market. So a lot of those flower users that maybe didn't have as much exposure to vape products, or could only get them when they were available through an illicit source, I think now you will start to see some of that shift and start to see some of those traditionally flower dominant consumers shift into that vape category. And that's partially why we also are thinking that we're going to see vape pick up a little bit more share than where it's at today.
Awesome. Another good question from Eric Axelson. What do you see as far as the spread between wholesale pricing and retail pricing across typical level 1 states that would be adult use states? And what can we expect in New Jersey? For example, at $14.19 a gram retail price, what would be a realistic wholesale price the cultivator should expect?
That one's a little bit challenging for me to put an exact number to, but I would say given that there's just not that many wholesalers in the New Jersey market right now because they're not approving any new cultivation licenses from adult retail license holders, it's probably going to be much higher than what you're seeing in other markets in terms of that wholesale price. And given that there's going to be a limited amount of wholesalers available in the market for some time, that wholesale price is probably going to stick a little bit higher than what we see in other states like Colorado and California, for example.
All right. Another good question from Julian, sort of drawing a comparison to the New York market. Could we expect the New York consumer data to be somewhat similar to this?
I think in some respects, absolutely. One of the things we didn't necessarily show in this presentation, but I thought was pretty interesting about New Jersey consumers is they had pretty strong preferences relative to the aggregate of consumers for some specific categories that just aren't even legally available in retail. Specifically, we're talking about things like spliffs or blunts or those categories where someone would have to incorporate their own inhalable tobacco product. So my sense is once we compare some of the New York consumer data, we'll probably see similar preferences for some of those categories that just aren't going to be available within the legal regulated storefront. But I also think, if we're talking about product decision drivers or store choice drivers, a lot of similarities if we think about the most populous urban areas in New Jersey and compare them to a lot of the more populous urban areas in New York, specifically New York City and the surrounding suburbs there. You're probably going to also see a lot of folks wanting that delivery or thinking that they're still going to have that available to them. So again, I think it's going to be a little bit of a shift for both New Jersey and New York consumers once they start to realize that some of the things that were present in the market aren't necessarily as pronounced when we look at the regulated market in those two states.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Another good one from Kalpesh. Apologies if I mispronounced that. How will other licenses and micro licenses impact the market? So the addition of new licensees aside from the existing vertically integrated medical licensees from before the launch of adult use.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Northeast and New Jersey specifically, has done a pretty good job of trying to maintain some of the social equity licenses and access. I think, though, unfortunately, there's going to be some challenges for some of those smaller or independent players to compete with the scalability that some of those large MSOs have. So I definitely think that they're going to cause a little bit of a ripple in the market once they do come online and give consumers another viable choice to purchase their cannabis products from. But ultimately, we've got to remember that some of those larger companies have years of history in New Jersey, and a lot of them also have lots of brain power and financial capital that they can move around to be a little bit more dynamic and respond to market challenges a little bit faster and more granularly than what we're going to see perhaps from some of the small and independents. That being said, I do want to point that there is, I think, definitely a bright side and some upside for the small and independents because, as we know, cannabis consumers are always evolving. There may absolutely be some consumers that specifically want to go to an independent or a socially social equity licensed adult use dispensaries. So in some respects, those differentiators could be a positive and get people to go into those dispensaries that maybe aren't necessarily chains or don't have as many locations. But yeah, it's going to be a little bit of an uphill battle for some of the small and independents. Not to say that they can't succeed, but definitely something to keep in mind.
So we have a follow-up question about deliveries. So can dispensaries deliver to patients and customers? I believe New Jersey does have delivery. I think it's licensed type 6. I don't know if there's any licensed currently for adult use delivery, but maybe you can share a bit more about that, Rick.
Yeah, so I know the medical, they definitely have access to that delivery. I know some things for some retail operations are still being ironed out in terms of alternative ways to get products beyond click and collect or just going to the store. But definitely, if retail becomes a much more established part, I think that retail will likely be larger in states like New York and New Jersey and other more populous East Coast markets, given that's what illicit consumers, are coming from. It's not necessarily where you could go meet someone outside. You can call people and they used to be able to deliver to you. So I think if folks can, in the regulated industry, tap into that and make it accessible, I think that could be a big differentiator for those retailers that are able to explore that option.
Awesome.
So I think we're just coming up at time. For those folks who maybe didn't have all of their questions answered, it looks like there were just a couple more of you. We can definitely go through that and we can post some responses to that. But with that, want to thank Brendan, want to thank BDSA, and want to thank everyone who's tuned in with us up until this time. It's been a great presentation and we look forward to giving you guys more insights as time goes on.
Yes, thank you, Rick, and thank you everybody for attending and for the great questions.